All right, so, you've sent us a whole bunch of research on meditation,
Yeah.
and it looks like you're really interested in getting to the bottom of,
Yeah.
how it can really, affect your life positively.
Mhm.
And we're talking about some pretty heavy-hitting sources here,
Oh,
too.
yeah.
Like, we've got stuff from PMC,
Yes.
JMA, NCCIH,
Real deal.
the big names in health and research.
Absolutely.
So it seems like you really want to know,
Yeah,
what's what
for sure.
without, getting bogged down with
Right.
all the technical jargon.
Yeah.
So that's what we're going to do today.
Okay.
We're going to take a deep dive into these sources.
Sounds good.
We're going to pull out all the most important and interesting findings
All right.
about how different kinds of meditation can really impact your well-being.
Uh-huh.
We're talking mental, physical, cognitive, emotional, the whole shebang.
Yeah, the whole 9 yards.
And just to give you an idea of how much this is resonating with people these days. Okay.
Did you know that in the U.S., the number of adults who practice meditation has actually more than doubled? Wow. Between 2002 and 2022.
Really? That's incredible.
It's actually become more popular than yoga
Oh, wow.
as a complementary health approach.
Huh, interesting.
So that's a pretty huge shift.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so let's jump in, and I think the best place to start is with mantra meditation.
Okay.
What exactly is that? What are we talking about here?
Well, basically, mantra meditation involves repeating
Okay.
a word or a phrase,
Okay.
or even just syllables,
Right.
over and over again.
Okay.
And you can do this silently in your mind,
Yeah.
or you can actually say it out loud.
Out loud.
And the interesting thing is,
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily have to have any, religious or spiritual meaning.
So it's not all like
Exactly.
Om Mani Padme Hum.
Right, not necessarily.
Okay.
Although those traditional mantras do exist, of course.
Right.
But the idea is that this repetition...
Kind of overrides that mental chatter that we all have.
Yeah.
That constant internal monologue.
Totally.
And by giving your brain something else to do, something to focus on,
Huh.
it can help redirect those negative or intrusive thoughts.
That makes sense. So instead of my brain replaying that,
Exactly.
awkward conversation I had yesterday on a loop,
Right.
I could be focusing on, repeating a simple word.
Yeah, like changing the channel in your mind.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Okay.
So while it's often grooved with
Okay.
focused attention meditations,
Right.
the fact that it involves this voluntary linguistic production
Okay.
makes it kind of unique
Interesting.
compared to focusing on your breath or external sounds.
Right.
One well-known form is transcendental meditation, or TM,
Okay.
which uses non-religious mantras
Okay.
to reach a state of transcendental consciousness.
Okay.
That's the goal anyway.
Right.
But there are others too, like Benson, relaxation, Jodi meditation,
Yeah.
CSM ACM meditation.
Okay, so lots of different types, all under this umbrella.
Yep.
Okay, so we've got a definition. Now, let's talk about effectiveness.
Right.
One of the sources you sent was a meta-analysis.
Yeah.
Specifically looking at mantra-based meditation, or MBM.
Right.
And its impact on mental health.
Exactly.
So what did they find?
Well, overall, the findings are quite encouraging.
Okay.
They found a significant reduction in anxiety stress
Okay.
and even PTSD
Wow.
and general psychopathology.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah. And the effect size was small to moderate, which means it's a noticeable difference,
Okay.
but not a massive change for everyone.
Right. So still significant.
Yeah, definitely.
But, there's a range.
Right.
Okay. What else?
They also saw improvements in depression
Okay.
and mental health-related quality of life.
So broader impacts beyond just those specific conditions.
Exactly.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and there were also some indications of improvements in burnout, insomnia, and even substance consumption. Yeah. But they did note that there were fewer studies looking at these areas specifically.
Okay, so more research needed there,
Yeah, potentially.
but still promising.
Absolutely.
So it's not just about feeling less anxious.
Right.
It could have these wider ripple effects.
Potentially, yeah.
That's really fascinating.
It is.
Now, what about comparing it to other treatments like psychotherapy?
Well, that's a good question.
Yeah.
And surprisingly, the meta-analysis didn't find any significant differences
Oh, wow.
when they compared MBM with psychotherapy.
So suggesting it could be a viable alternative,
Potentially, yeah.
or at least a complementary approach.
Right.
That's huge.
It is a significant finding.
Yeah.
And the overall result across all the studies
Yeah.
was statistically significant with a G value of -0.46.
Okay, and remind me again what that means?
So the G value is a measure of effect size,
Right.
and a negative value in this case
Okay.
means that the meditation had a beneficial effect
Okay.
compared to the control group.
So lower scores on those measure.
Exactly.
And
And they also did some subgroup analyses
okay.
looking at different factors like the type of meditation,
Uh-huh.
the control group, the
Okay.
population, the publication year, the follow-up length.
Right.
And none of these showed significant differences,
Okay.
which suggests that the effect is pretty consistent.
So across the board.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And they also checked for publication bias
Okay, good.
and found no evidence of it.
So it's a pretty solid meta-analysis then.
It seems to be, yeah.
Now, were there any specific comparisons that stood out in the research?
Yeah, there were a few.
Okay.
One study on Vietnam veterans
Okay.
compared TM to various psychotherapies,
Mm-hmm.
and they found a strong effect favoring TM for anxiety reduction.
Okay.
So that's pretty compelling.
Yeah, it is.
Then there was a comparison of meditation to a control group for depression,
Okay.
and that showed a significant favorable result for meditation,
Okay.
especially when compared to waiting lists or no intervention.
Makes sense.
Interestingly, though, this effect was mainly seen in healthy adults
Oh.
and not so much in clinical samples.
Huh. So maybe the immediate impact is more pronounced
Yeah, it's
if
possible.
you're not already dealing with severe depression.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And they also found that longer follow-up periods
Right.
beyond 4 months
Yeah.
showed lower non-significant results.
Interesting.
So maybe the initial boost is strong, but then it kind of levels off?
Could be.
Okay, what about PTSD?
Well, for PTSD,
Hmm.
there was a significant positive result for meditation
Okay.
when they used clinician-reported scores
Huh.
on the CHAP-PSS scale.
All right.
They also found a significant benefit for meditation
Okay.
compared to psychotherapy
Uh-huh.
when using self-reported scores on the PCL.
Interesting. So both clinician and self-reported measures showed improvement.
Exactly.
Okay, so overall it looks like mantra meditation,
Right.
showing real promise
Yeah,
for a whole range of mental health challenges.
it seems so.
And the source also mentioned it's pretty easy to learn, right?
Yeah, that's one of the big advantages of MBM.
Okay.
It doesn't require any specialized knowledge
Mm-hmm.
or specific religious beliefs.
So it's accessible.
Yeah, very much so.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to another type of meditation.
Sure.
Metta meditation or loving kindness meditation.
Yes.
What is that all about?
So meditation is focused on cultivating
Okay.
feelings of compassion and goodwill.
Okay.
So you silently repeat phrases
Right.
that express wishes for happiness, health, and well-being,
Mm-hmm.
not just for yourself,
Right.
but for others as well.
Okay, so actively generating those positive feelings.
Exactly.
Interesting.
It's about expanding your sense of empathy and connection.
Okay.
And it typically starts with directing kindness towards yourself,
Right.
which can be a really important first step.
Yeah, for sure.
And then gradually extending that kindness outwards
Okay.
to loved ones, acquaintances, and even people you might have difficulties with.
So broadening that circle of compassion.
Exactly.
And what does the research say about its benefits?
Well, meta-analyses have shown that regular meta practice
Yeah.
can enhance positive affect,
Okay.
meaning you generally experience more positive emotions.
Right.
It can also reduce self-criticism,
Oh, that's good.
which is really important for well-being.
Yeah.
And interestingly, it's also been found to reduce symptoms of PTSD and depression.
Wow.
So similar to mantra meditation,
Yeah.
but with a different focus.
Right. So mantra is about quieting the mind,
Yeah.
and metta is about cultivating those positive emotional states.
Exactly.
That's really interesting.
It is.
All right, let's move on to the third type you mentioned.
Okay.
Stillness meditation.
All right.
What is that?
So stillness meditation, as the name implies,
Yeah.
emphasizes quietude.
Okay.
You simply observe your thoughts, sensations, and emotions
Uh-huh.
without judgment
Okay.
and without getting carried away by them.
So no specific focus, like a mantra or a feeling. It's exactly.
Just observing.
Yeah, just being present.
Interesting.
The goal is to foster deep relaxation
Oh,
by just being with whatever arises
right.
and letting it pass.
Okay.
This is thought to enhance awareness
Uh-huh.
and reduce stress by lowering cortisol levels.
Okay, so it's like giving your mind a break
Yeah, exactly.
from all the doing
Right.
and just letting it be.
Exactly.
And what about the benefits?
Well, studies have suggested
Yeah.
improvements in attention and mental clarity.
Okay.
It's like training your mind to be more focused.
So it's almost counterintuitive
Right.
that by doing less,
Yeah,
you can actually improve your focus.
exactly.
That's fascinating.
It is.
Okay, so we've covered the three main types you mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
mantra, metta, and stillness.
Right.
Now let's talk about how long we actually spend meditating.
Okay.
You mentioned both long and short sessions.
Yeah.
What's the difference in their impact?
So both have value,
Okay.
but they might offer slightly different benefits.
Yeah.
Okay.
Short sessions, like 5 to 15 minutes,
Yeah.
can give you immediate stress relief,
Okay.
and they're easier to fit into a busy schedule,
Right.
which helps with consistency.
Yeah. Consistency is key.
Absolutely.
So even a quick 5 minutes can make a difference.
It can, yeah, even a short burst of mindfulness
Okay.
can help to calm things down.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
And what about longer sessions?
Longer sessions, 20 minutes or more,
Okay.
seem to lead to more profound changes,
Okay.
both physiologically and neurologically.
Like what?
Well, studies have shown
Yeah.
structural changes in the brain
Wow.
with long-term practice.
Like actual physical changes.
Yeah, things like increased gray matter density
Okay.
in areas that are important for memory, motion regulation, and learning.
So the brain is actually changing.
Yeah, and highlights the amazing plasticity of the brain.
That's incredible.
It is.
So to sum it up,
Yeah.
short meditations are good for mood and stress in the short term. And longer sessions lead to more persistent cognitive and emotional benefits.
Exactly.
So both are valuable tools.
Yes,
And the best choice depends on your individual needs and goals.
absolutely.
Okay, so it's not about one being better than the other.
Right.
It's about finding what works for you.
Exactly.
Okay, now let's zoom out a bit
Okay.
and look at the overall findings from all this research.
Right.
What are the big takeaways from the Goyle study, the NCCIH info?
Right. Well, the Goyle meta-analysis found moderate evidence
Okay.
that mindfulness meditation can improve anxiety, depression, and pain
Okay.
in the short term.
Up to 6 months.
Yeah, up to 6 months
Okay.
compared to non-specific active controls.
So that's a pretty good sign.
Yeah, moderate evidence is a good indicator.
Okay.
They also found low evidence for improving stress and distress
Okay.
and mental health-related quality of life.
Okay.
And for positive mood, attention substance use eating, sleep, and weight.
Right.
The evidence was either low or insufficient.
Okay, so more research needed there.
Yeah, for sure.
Interestingly, they also found no evidence that meditation was better than other active treatments.
Like medication or exercise.
A therapy.
Right.
So it's not necessarily a cure-all,
No, it's not a magic bullet.
but it can be beneficial.
Yeah, it seems to have a real impact.
Okay, what else does the NCCIH tell us?
So the NCCIH provides some good info on safety and effectiveness.
Okay,
They highlight that meditation is generally considered safe,
good.
but there is limited research on harms specifically.
Okay.
A 2020 review found that about 8% of participants
Yeah.
reported negative effects,
Like what?
things like anxiety or depression.
Okay,
But that's similar to what's seen with other therapies.
so not out of the ordinary.
Right.
Okay.
And they also noted that MBSR,
Mindfulness-based stress reduction.
yeah,
Okay,
didn't seem to be more harmful than no treatment.
so that's reassuring.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
what about effectiveness?
Well, they echo the growing popularity of meditation, and people use it for all sorts of reasons.
Right.
General wellness, disease prevention,
Yeah.
relaxation, stress reduction, better sleep.
So a whole spectrum of reasons.
Yeah, it seems to be pretty versatile.
Okay, and for anxiety and depression specifically,
Okay.
what did they find?
So a 2018 analysis found that mindfulness-based approaches
Yeah.
were better than no treatment
Okay.
and just as effective as CBT and antidepressants.
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
It is, but a more recent analysis in 2021
Okay.
showed mixed results for anxiety disorders in the short term
Okay.
and no long-term effects in the few longer studies.
So the evidence is still mixed there.
Yeah, it seems so.
Okay. What about high blood pressure?
They found a possible benefit there,
Okay.
especially with MBSR
Okay.
for people with health conditions.
Uh-huh.
But the American Heart Association statement
Yeah.
suggests that the specific effects on blood pressure aren't fully understood.
So more research is needed there too.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. And what about pain and sleep?
For pain, the results are mixed.
Okay.
There's some evidence for short-term improvement in low back pain
Uh-huh.
with MBSR
Okay.
and a strong association with pain reduction in opioid users,
Interesting.
but no evidence for reducing acute pain severity.
Okay.
And there's some indication that mindfulness meditation
Yeah.
might be more effective than other treatments for chronic pain,
Right.
but the quality of those studies was low.
Okay, so we have to take that with a grain of salt.
Right.
And they also found that MBSR and CBT were comparable for chronic pain.
That's right.
Okay, and for sleep.
For sleep mindfulness, meditation improved sleep quality
Okay.
more than education-based treatments.
So it's doing something.
Yeah.
But it wasn't different from CBT or exercise.
Right, so there might be other equally effective options.
Okay, so it's not a magic bullet for sleep either.
It seems that way.
All right, what about substance use and PTSD?
For substance use disorder,
Yeah.
mindfulness-based approaches decreased cravings and were slightly better than other therapies for abstinence.
So that's promising. And
Yeah.
for PTSD?
They found that meditation and mindfulness
Yeah.
may reduce PTSD symptoms.
Okay, good.
And a 2018 trial found that meditation was as effective as prolonged exposure therapy
Wow.
for PTSD in veterans
Okay.
and better than PTSD health education.
So that's a really strong finding.
It is.
Okay. And any other areas they highlighted?
Yeah, they mentioned potential benefits for cancer patients
Okay.
in reducing distress, fatigue, sleep disturbance,
Uh-huh.
pain, anxiety, and depression.
So a whole lot of benefits there.
Yeah, but mostly in breast cancer patients.
Okay.
They also found that mindfulness practices can help manage eating behaviors, but not so much for weight loss.
Interesting.
And programs that combine formal and informal mindfulness
Yeah.
were more effective for both weight and eating.
Okay, so maybe a more holistic approach is needed there.
Could be.
And finally, for ADHD,
Right.
the evidence is still inconclusive.
Yeah, more research is needed there.
So it's a really wide range of potential benefits,
Right.
but the strength of the evidence varies quite a bit
Definitely.
across different areas.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are some of the limitations
Okay.
that were highlighted in these sources?
Well, both the Goyle and the Alvarez-Perez meta-analyses,
Mhm.
as well as the NCCIH overview,
Yeah.
all point to some limitations in the research.
Okay, like what?
One big one is methodological issues,
Right.
like lack of blinding high dropout rates,
Yeah.
unclear allocation to groups, and not using intention to treat analysis.
Right, so the quality of the research isn't always top-notch,
That's right.
and that can affect the reliability of the findings.
Exactly.
Okay, what else?
There's also a lot of variability
Yeah.
in the types of meditation programs studied
Right.
and the control groups they're compared to.
So it's hard to compare apples to apples.
It can be, yeah.
And importantly, few studies have focused on long-term effects
Right.
or on specific psychiatric populations.
That's a key point.
So while the initial findings are promising,
Uh-huh.
we need more rigorous and long-term research
Yeah, we need more robust studies.
to really nail down the benefits,
Well,
who they work best for.
For sure.
Well, this has been a really fascinating deep dive
Yeah, so
into the world of meditation.
it's a fascinating field.
And it seems like there's real potential there
Yeah, there's a lot of promise.
for improving our well-being in all sorts of ways.
Right.
From reducing anxiety and stress
Yeah.
to boosting our cognitive function and emotional resilience.
Uh-huh.
So for you, the listener, who
Yeah.
wanted to learn about this quickly but thoroughly,
Uh-huh.
hopefully this has given you a solid foundation
Yeah, I think so.
of what the research says
Absolutely.
about the positive effects of meditation.
Yeah.
So here's a final thought for you to consider.
Okay.
Of all the benefits we've talked about,
Right.
whether it's the focused calm of mantra,
Uh-huh.
the expansive compassion of metta, or the quiet awareness of stillness,
Right.
what resonates most with you?
That's a good question.
And what might be your next step
Yeah.
in exploring these practices further?
Hmm.
Maybe try out some guided meditations.
Right.
You can find them on apps or online.
Yeah, there are tons of resources out there.
Or maybe look for local groups or centers.
That's a good idea.
Or even go back to those source articles
Right.
and dig a little deeper into
Yeah.
the areas that really grabbed your attention, whatever you choose.
Right.
We hope you feel informed and equipped
Yeah,
to explore the potential of meditation in your own life.
absolutely.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
We'll see you next time.
All right, take care.
Bye.